It begins in the dark. Not the comforting dark of a sleeping world, but the deep, oppressive blackness of a laboratory after midnight. A place where the known laws of the universe are supposed to hold sway. But on this night, in the winter of 1895, something breaks the rules. A faint, ethereal glow, shimmering in a place it has no right to be. A silent ghost of light, born from a mistake. A man, alone in the quiet, sees it. He sees a power that can pierce through flesh and bone, a force that will redefine reality itself. He doesn't know it yet, but he has just stumbled upon a discovery that will grant humanity the power of gods, and the curse that comes with it. He has opened a door that can never be closed again, and the price for that knowledge would be paid in blood and agony, starting with the very people who dared to look. This is the story of a laboratory accident that nearly killed its pioneers and exposed a breakthrough the world was simply not ready for. The late 19th century was an age of supreme confidence. Humanity stood on the shoulders of giants like Newton, believing it had tamed the world with logic and mechanics. The universe was seen as a grand, predictable clockwork machine. Steam engines powered empires across continents, telegraph cables pulsed with messages under vast oceans, and the soft hiss of gaslight illuminated cities teeming with progress. Science was a realm of certainty. The atom was the smallest, most fundamental piece of existence, an indivisible, solid little ball. Everything had its place. It was a world of solid wood, heavy steel, and unshakable truths. There were still mysteries, of course, hidden in the deepest jungles or the darkest depths of the sea, but the fundamental rules of existence felt complete. Physicists believed their work was nearly done, reduced to simply adding more decimal points to existing measurements. They were proud, they were comfortable, and they were about to be proven catastrophically wrong. In a small university town in Germany, the foundations of this solid, predictable world were about to crack, not with a bang, but with a whisper of pale green light. His name was Wilhelm Röntgen, a meticulous, unassuming physics professor in Würzburg, Bavaria. On November 8, 1895, he was working late, as he often did, experimenting with a cathode ray tube. This was a common piece of equipment at the time, a glass vacuum tube through which an electrical current was passed. Researchers were fascinated by the strange rays they produced, but their true nature was a mystery. To better see the faint effects of the cathode rays, Röntgen had completely covered his tube in heavy black cardboard, sealing it off from the room. The lab was pitch black. He flipped the switch. The current hummed. And then he saw it. Several feet away from the covered tube, on a separate bench, a small screen coated in barium platinocyanide began to glow. A faint, shimmering fluorescence. It was impossible. The cathode rays themselves could only travel a few centimeters in the air. The tube was completely sealed. No light could be escaping. He turned off the current. The glow vanished. He turned it on again. The ghostly light returned. A cold dread, mixed with exhilarating curiosity, washed over him. Something was crossing the room. Something invisible, unknown, and powerful enough to pass straight through the black cardboard shield. He picked up the glowing screen and moved it. The light persisted. He held up a book. The rays passed through it. He held up a piece of wood. They passed through that too. Then, in a moment that would forever be etched in the annals of science, he held up his own hand in front of the screen, and he saw his own bones, the living skeleton inside his flesh, outlined in shadowy detail. He had discovered a new kind of light, a phantom ray that could see through the solid world. He had no name for it. He called it simply X-ray, the X for unknown. For 2 months he worked in frantic, obsessive secrecy, eating and sleeping in his lab, terrified someone else would discover his secret. He was a man haunted by a ghost he had invited into our world. The news, when he finally published it, exploded across the globe. It wasn't a slow burn of scientific debate. It was a wildfire of public fascination and hysteria. Within weeks, laboratories around the world were replicating his experiment. The idea of seeing inside the human body without a scalpel was revolutionary, magical. X-rays became a cultural phenomenon. Shoe stores offered to X-ray children's feet to ensure a perfect fit. Society parties featured bone portraits as a macabre form of entertainment. People could buy cheap, handheld X-ray viewers to amaze their friends. It was a novelty, a sideshow attraction born from a physics lab. But the carnival was short-lived. The first whispers of something sinister began to surface. Researchers reported their skin turning red and sore after exposure. Their hair fell out. Thomas Edison, who was eagerly developing his own X-ray technologies, noticed his assistants were suffering from strange ailments. His most dedicated assistant, a man named Clarence Daly, developed horrific lesions on his hands and arms. The skin became cancerous. Doctors were forced to amputate both of his arms in a desperate attempt to save his life, but it was too late. He died in agony, becoming one of the first martyrs of the atomic age. The invisible rays were not harmless ghosts. They were silent killers. While the public was playing with X-ray toys, another scientist in Paris, Henri Becquerel, was captivated by Röntgen's work. He wondered if fluorescent materials, which glow after being exposed to light, might also emit these new X-rays. He began experimenting with uranium salts, but a series of cloudy days in Paris forced him to put his experiment away in a desk drawer, leaving the uranium on top of a photographic plate wrapped in black paper. When he later developed the plate out of sheer curiosity, he was stunned. It was fogged. The uranium had emitted its own rays, with no stimulation from the sun at all. It was producing energy from nothing. This accident, born of bad weather, had just revealed an even deeper mystery: natural radioactivity. This is where the story turns from a scientific curiosity into an epic of human endeavor and tragic sacrifice. Two young researchers in Paris, Marie and Pierre Curie, heard of Becquerel's strange findings. They were captivated. Marie, in particular, sensed that something profound had been uncovered. She decided to make it the subject of her doctoral thesis. She began testing every element she could find. She quickly confirmed that uranium was radioactive, but then she found something startling. Pitchblende, the raw ore from which uranium was extracted, was far more radioactive than the pure uranium itself. The only possible explanation was that the ore contained another unknown element, one that was fantastically more radioactive. The Curies embarked on a quest that would consume their lives. They secured a workspace, but it was no pristine laboratory. It was a disused, leaky shack with a dirt floor and a glass roof that failed to keep out the rain. For 4 years, they toiled in this shed, performing back-breaking labor. They processed tons of pitchblende ore, boiling it in giant cauldrons, stirring the bubbling, toxic sludge with iron rods as tall as they were. It was grueling, industrial work, not delicate science. Through this process, slowly, painstakingly, they isolated not one, but 2 new elements: polonium, named after Marie's native Poland, and radium. Radium was their miracle. It was 1,000,000 times more radioactive than uranium. It glowed in the dark with what Marie described as a faint, fairy-like light. They were enchanted. They carried tubes of it in their pockets. Marie kept a glowing vial by her bedside as a nightlight. They had no idea that this beautiful, ghostly light was a poison, slowly destroying their bodies from the inside out. Their discovery shattered physics. The atom was not a solid, unbreakable ball. It was a tiny, seething universe of its own, capable of spontaneously releasing immense amounts of energy. A door had been kicked open into a new reality, one that would lead directly to nuclear power, radiation therapy for cancer, and the terrifying spectacle of the atomic bomb. The energy that would one day power entire cities and threaten the very existence of humanity was first glimpsed as a faint glow in a Parisian shack, isolated by 2 people who were sacrificing their lives for a truth they could barely comprehend. The impact was immeasurable. From that single, accidental observation of a glowing screen, the entire 20th century was redirected. The Curies became world famous, winning Nobel Prizes for their work. But their bodies were failing. They suffered from chronic fatigue, burns, and eventually fatal illnesses caused by their long-term exposure to the very elements they had discovered. Pierre was killed in a street accident, but he was already severely weakened by radiation sickness. Marie died of aplastic anemia, her bone marrow destroyed. Even today, her notebooks from the 1890s are so intensely radioactive that they are stored in lead-lined boxes and can only be handled by people wearing protective gear. They are artifacts of a breakthrough, but they are also relics of a silent poison. The faint shimmer that Röntgen saw in his darkened lab was the first flicker of the nuclear age. It gave us the ability to diagnose diseases and treat cancer. It gave us a new source of immense power, but it also unleashed the mushroom cloud. It is the ultimate paradox of discovery. We reached into the heart of the atom to grasp a new kind of fire, but we were burned in the process. The pioneers paid the first price, a down payment in suffering for the knowledge that would forever change our world. We are their heirs, living in the world they inadvertently created, a world of incredible technological marvels and ever-present existential threats, all born from a simple laboratory mistake. How many of our modern marvels carry a hidden cost we have yet to understand? What other invisible forces are we toying with, blind to their true power? That single moment reminds us that history doesn't always turn on grand battles or royal decrees. Sometimes it turns on a flicker of light in a dark room, noticed by someone curious enough to ask why. If you want to uncover more of the hidden stories and accidental discoveries that shaped our reality, be sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more journeys into the real butterfly effect.